You read that, like, oh, you're reading Quran by yourself, you're going to be misguided. You need to master master usul al-fiqh, sharia, aqidah, usul. There's a long list of ulum before you even open a page of the Quran. Allah allows many people to be misguided with the Quran. Then how do I know I'm not one of them? And then he says he guides many also with it. But how do I know if I'm going to be in the right camp? In fact, in many Muslim countries, where I come from in Pakistan, neighboring country, huge population in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, many of these South Asian countries, we learn growing up, don't read the Quran yourself. You're going to get misguided. Allah says, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. But I was going to give you other examples too of يَقُولُون being sarcastic. Like يَقُولُون فَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ يَقُول أَيُّكُمْ زَادَتْهُ هَذِهِ إِيمَانًا. Among them is those who say, who of you heard this and their iman increased? Who of you, through this verse, their faith enhanced? They're not really asking a question, they're making a sarcastic comment. So that yaqul is in that vein, right? Okay. Now, Allah says, وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. He guides many with it. Who did he mention first? Those he allows to be misguided. He's given this book as guidance, but a misuse of this book, and you are free to be misguided. And what's the only difference? Mindset. It's the only humility. Humility to the word, or a pompous rejection of the word. That's the only difference. And then he says, now as I read this ayah, I start getting nervous. Well, if Allah allows many people to be misguided with the Quran, then how do I know I'm not one of them? And then he says he guides many also with it. But how do I know if I'm going to be in the right camp? In fact, in many Muslim countries, where I come from in Pakistan, neighboring country, huge population in India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, many of these South Asian countries, we learn growing up, don't read the Quran yourself. You're going to get misguided. You need to master usul al-fiqh, sharia, aqidah, usul. There's a long list of ulum before you even open a page of the Quran. Other than that, just recite it for barakah, right? That's what you learn, right? And otherwise, you're going to be misguided. And when you read that, you're like, oh, you're reading Quran by yourself, you're going to be misguided. You're going to be misguided. When the Quran came, even the jinns were commenting on the Quran without getting an ijazah in fiqh. In the Quran, right? And the Quran is telling us about young men who didn't have any prophet, who just said there's a single God, and they ran off into a cave. And they're heroes in the Quran with no ijazat, right? But now we have to go through 18 filters before we even open the book. That's the new standard, right? So we misinform the public to say, don't engage with the Quran, you're going to be misguided. No, you will be misguided if you come to it with the wrong attitude. With the wrong attitude. I should come to the book with humility, looking for answers. And when I get questions, I should go to those who know more than me and seek their help, and continue to seek their help, but still continue to ask questions. That's what's supposed to happen. That's how I'll know I'm not falling in the first category. But then there's another safety filter in this ayah. Allah says, وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Just when I was wondering, He allows many to be misguided, many to be guided. Allah says, and by the way, He does not allow anybody to be misguided by these examples, except those that are fasiqeen, the corrupt. The corrupt. Now, this is really cool. I've said this enough times, but I don't get tired of saying it. There's two versions of the word corrupt in Arabic. Fasid with a dal, and fasiq with a qaf. And the fasiq with a qaf, fasaqa, is actually used for when the goo on the inside of a fruit, kharajat min qishriha, when it comes out from the shell. So if an apple is bad, but it looks good, but only when you open it, you find it's rotten on the inside, it's fasid with a dal. But if you look at the apple, it's already gooey. It's got the brown spot on it. You can stick your finger in it. That's fasiq. That's fasiq. So fasiq actually means a corrupt person whose corruption is no longer hidden. It's actually come out. It's exposed. A fasid could be a person who's corrupt, but their corruption is not very well known. It's embedded. It's hidden. That's the difference between fasiq and fasid. But so, by the way, for food also, you can say ta'amun fasid and ta'amun fasiq. Labanun fasid, labanun fasiq. If the milk is fasid, it looks good, and then you drink it and you find out. But if the laban is fasiq, it's turned green already. So you already know, inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Right? Okay? That would be fasiq and fasid. Allah says the only people who Allah allows to be misguided, even though they're engaging with the examples, are the fasiqeen. And so Allah is taking us in a very different direction. This is going to take about 10 minutes for me to explain, no longer, and I'll call it a night. But please pay attention to this. Usually, when you don't understand something, you are missing something called prerequisites. If you don't understand multiplication, maybe you don't understand some basic mathematics. So if you go back to the basics and build back again, and you'll be able to understand multiplication. And maybe you need multiplication first before you can get into division, etc., etc. So you need prerequisites. If you're having a hard time with accounting 301, maybe you should have paid more attention in accounting 201 before you jumped into accounting 301. Make sense? Right? So when you don't understand something, or you're lost engaging with something, usually the problem is an intellectual deficiency, a knowledge deficiency. The Quran is pointing out that people are not able to get guidance from these ayat, but he's not saying the problem is a knowledge deficiency. The problem is a moral deficiency. The problem is a spiritual deficiency. The problem is a character deficiency, not an intellectual deficiency. Why did Allah say that? Allah was talking to ulama of Bani Israel who have zero knowledge deficiency. In fact, they were extremely intellectual. In fact, they were so intellectual, they recognized the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as well as they would recognize their own children. كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم. They recognize. Knowledge was not the problem. Something else is the problem. So when we go around telling the ummah needs knowledge, the ummah needs knowledge, the ummah needs knowledge, bro, what Quran are you reading? We don't just need knowledge. We don't just need knowledge. There needs to be knowledge education, but there needs to be character building also. Give it whatever name you want to give it. Call it tazkiyah, call it tarbiyah, call it akhlaq, whatever you want to call it. But there needs to be character transformation. And that's not the same as education. Let's be real about this. How many youth here ever been to Sunday school? Sunday school? Okay, some of you have done time. Okay. All right, so you've been to Sunday school, you have a 1 hour lesson on akhlaq, kindness to parents, respect for elders, etc., etc. You're learning about manners. You're learning about it. That's still education. And then you get a true-false question or a quiz at the end. And there's a kid who got 100 on the test, on the akhlaq test. And that same kid is bullying other kids in the break. And that same kid is talking back to the teacher. And that same kid is yelling at his mother, even though he got 100 on the what test? The akhlaq test. But they're teaching akhlaq. How come he's not? Because we still think that character will come through knowledge. Just the moment you have knowledge, everything will be good. Who said? Iblis didn't have knowledge? Iblis is pretty knowledgeable. He's got a lot of knowledge of history. He was actually there. I think he knows the story of Adam alayhi salam better than you and me, because he was part of the story. He knows the seerah better than you and I. Why? Because he was there. He knows the stories of the prophets better than any of us can. He knows the angels better than we do. Why? He's hung out with them before. There's no shortage of knowledge. As we study Surah Al-Baqarah, we'll find Allah will acknowledge the depth of the knowledge of the Israelites. The depth of their knowledge. In fact, one of the names of them in the Quran is Al-Ahbar. Not in this surah, in another surah, Al-Ahbar. Al-Ahbar comes from Hibr, which means ink. Which means they spend their entire lives opening up scrolls and closing scrolls, and their fingers are always covered in ink. These are people of ink, right? That's how much knowledge they have. With that in mind, understand what is Allah saying about people who will not be able to benefit from the examples in the Quran, from the lessons of the Quran, Who will be these people? Al-fasiqin. Let's figure out who they are. Allah will give us the definition in the next ayah. الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ. Those who violate the promise made with Allah even after it had been made binding. Whoa. We already made a promise with Allah and it was already binding. And Allah says there are people who break that promise. And I'm sitting there going, oh, what promise did I make? I didn't make a promise. What promise is this referring to? And then you find a couple of ayat later, the story of Adam begins. And by the end of that story, Allah says, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَنْ تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَكَذَّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا أُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Whoever follows my guidance will have no fear or shall not grieve. And whoever denies and calls my revelations a lie, those are the people in hellfire, in which they will remain. There was a binding agreement taken from the story of Adam alayhi salam applying to all of his children, including ourselves, and Allah is saying that is the agreement that still holds for every human being. Whenever I send guidance, you'll take it seriously. The first definition of the corrupt is they don't care about their relationship with the guidance of Allah. Listen to me carefully about this one. If you remember nothing else, I know that's easy for you to remember nothing else. Just remember this one. Our relationship with Allah is equal to our relationship with the guidance sent by Allah. I'll say that again. Our relationship with Allah is equal to our relationship with the guidance sent by Allah. الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ. And the guidance is many things, but then Allah says, by the way, the most important parts of that guidance, what are they? وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ. They cut what Allah commands to keep joined. Very simple. Who will not benefit from the examples? People who cut what Allah commanded to keep joined. First of all, cutting the example from its purpose. Allah commanded it to be joined. Cutting the ayat from the surah to which they belong. Allah kept that to be joined. Many Sahaba, many Tabi'een, many ulama commented on this ayah and they said what? They cut between Allah and His Messenger. I want to listen to Allah, I don't want to listen to His Messenger. Others said, and this is a very common understanding of this ayah, it's reinforced by other places in the Quran, they cut family relations. People who can't even respect the bonds of family will not be able to respect the bond they have with Allah. In fact, in the Quran, the taqwa of Allah and the taqwa of family relations are put next to each other. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. So just like we must not disconnect our relationship with Allah, the biggest proof of that is we must not disconnect our relationship with families.